Does this picture freak you out? Does it disgust you? Well, disgust is just one of many behaviors that we have, which has a development that can be explained through evolution. This tutorial will be going over a brief overview of evolutionary psychology, homosexuality in evolutionary contexts, a study that supports that, and the relevance of that study in the biological level of analysis. Evolution is believed to stem from the Darwinian idea of survival of the fittest. Therefore, common human behaviors that have survived to this day are those that aided in survival and reproduction. In other words, it must have been adaptive in past situations to still exist today. In evolutionary psychology, it is assumed that A. Behaviors can be inherited, and B. Genetically based behaviors are lost over time because individuals possessing them don't survive. That is, behaviors which aid survival are passed down generations, while those that don't belong to people who don't live long enough to reproduce. Homosexuality is a trait that is very alive in our society today. When considering homosexuality in the context of evolutionary psychology, the conundrum that comes to mind is, how could a trait that, due to an inherent attraction to the same sex, typically prevents opposite genders from procreating, be helpful to survival and reproduction? All the good ones are gay or taken. Almost everybody's heard of that saying before, and there's actually some truth to it as well. Let's put it this way. Who would you rather spend the rest of their life with? Someone who is kind, caring, and sensitive, or someone who is brutish, uncultured, and cruel? Obviously, we would choose the former, but who is more likely to be homosexual? Again, it is blatantly clear, the kind, caring, sensitive one. So where does this fit in when considering evolution and adaptation? G.E. Hutchinson answered this question with the tipping point model, which hypothesizes that males are more likely to be successful in reproduction if they have attractive, but at the same time feminine, traits. But if too many of these alleles are inherited, the tipping point is passed, and the male becomes attracted to other males. In 2008, Brendan Sasicha and his colleagues set out to empirically prove this theory in a study called Genetic Factors Predisposing to Homosexuality May Increase Mating Success in Heterosexuals. The aim of the study was to test three hypotheses. 1. Gender identity that does not match a person's physical phenotype is associated with both homosexuality and a relatively high number of opposite sex partners in heterosexuals. For example, if someone who is physically male feels like he identifies more with a woman than a man, it would either mean he was homosexual or had a high number of sex partners if he were heterosexual. 2. This is caused by genetic factors that predispose individuals to homosexuality. And 3. Heterosexuals with homosexual twins have elevated numbers of opposite sex partners. The sample of the study consisted of 4,904 Australian twins of ages 19 to 52, with both male and female participants. A total of 1,907 twin pairs participated, and of these twin pairs, there were both monozygotic and dizygotic twins. Monozygotic twins are identical twins that share 100% of their genes. Participants were asked to complete a mailed questionnaire about their sexual behavior, personality, and demographic information, which was to be submitted anonymously. To measure sexual orientation, the questionnaire asked, which of the following best describes your sexual feelings at present, and provided 7 response options to choose from, with 0 corresponding to I am only attracted to women, and 7 corresponding to I am only attracted to men. To test gender identity, the participants were asked whether they felt more similar to men or women and the degree to which they felt that way. The participants were presented with 6 dichotomous items, which were used to come up with a score. High scores meant sex atypical gender identity. Lastly, for the number of opposite sex partners, participants were to answer one question which quantified, in numbers, approximately how many men or women they had sexual contact with. The data that the study yielded showed that sex atypical gender identity was indeed associated with both homosexuality and in heterosexuals a relatively larger number of opposite sex partners. As would be expected, homosexuals did have a noticeably higher sex atypical gender identity than the heterosexuals did. But after removing homosexuals from the data, the relationship between sex atypical gender identity and the high number of opposite sex partners in both men and women could be clearly seen. It was found that overlapping genetic factors were the cause of both the gender identity and the sexual orientation of participants. Overlapping genetic factors were responsible for the gender identity and the number of sexual partners in heterosexuals. Additionally, heterosexuals who had homosexual twins had higher numbers of sex partners, which shows that the shared genes did make successful mating more probable. However, the trends in the data that support this third point were relatively insignificant, and therefore, the hypothesis should not be fully accepted without further research. With regards to validity, the use of mail and anonymous submission of the questionnaire answers probably helped towards getting more truthful answers from participants in this sensitive subject. However, the fact that the questionnaire was solely about sexual orientation may have led to demand characteristics, where the participants answered the way they thought the researcher wanted them to. The study concluded that gender identity, sexual orientation, and the degree of success in mating are all linked to common genes. To a certain extent, having the genes that give males certain desirable feminine qualities would aid them in successfully reproducing, which shows the evolutionary survival of the fittest aspect of the phenomena. On the other hand, the inheritance of an excess of these genes would lead to an attraction to those of the same sex, or homosexuality. Although this does not impair chances of survival, it does prevent the individual from reproducing, and therefore the trait would have died out if not for the benefit of having an optimal number of these alleles. As another link to the biological level of analysis, this study also supports the idea that patterns of behavior can be inherited through genetics.